My daughter was selling my wife's necklace, and when I saw her at the jeweler's shop, she started shouting at me. The phone rang long after midnight, its sound slicing through the quiet house like a knife through silk. For a few heartbeats, I thought I was dreaming, that the voice on the other end belonged to my wife. Soft, trembling, still echoing from the life we once shared. But then reality cut in. It wasn't her. It was a stranger, a woman whose tone carried the weight of something I wasn't ready to hear. She asked my name, confirmed the address, and then said she was calling about a necklace, a gold one, engraved on the back with the words, "Forever Lila." My chest tightened. That necklace had been buried with my wife, or at least, it should have been. I remember the day I placed it around her neck for the last time. The sun was pale, half hidden behind clouds, and my daughter Emily couldn't meet my eyes. She was 17 then, quiet, fragile, and lost in a grief she didn't yet understand. I never imagined she would take that necklace from her mother's resting place. I never imagined she would sell it for something as fleeting as a vacation. But grief turns people into versions of themselves they don't recognize. And sometimes, the people we love most are the ones who twist the knife without meaning to. If stories like this grip you, if you've ever wondered how love curdles into betrayal, how silence can rot a family from the inside out, stay with me. Like this video if you believe some things are sacred, share it if you've ever felt that fragile thread between love and loss, and subscribe so you don't miss what came after that call. Because what I learned that night didn't just change the way I saw my daughter, it changed the way I saw my wife's death. The morning light crept through the curtains like an intruder, soft but unwelcome. The world outside was still. That kind of silence that follows a storm, or maybe the silence before one. I sat at the edge of the dining table, coffee cooling untouched beside my hand, staring at the small jewelry box that once held everything I thought was left of my wife. The velvet inside was faded, and the indentation where the necklace used to rest was still there, a hollow in the shape of a memory. I had opened that box countless times over the years, sometimes just to see it, sometimes to feel her presence lingering in the gleam of the gold. But that morning, when I lifted the lid and saw nothing but air, something inside me cracked in a way I couldn't immediately name. Emily came downstairs like she always did, wrapped in her phone's glow, thumbs dancing across the screen. There was something about her that morning, a hesitance in her step, a pause before she looked up. She said good morning, and I said it back, though my voice came out wrong. I asked if she'd seen her mother's necklace, trying to sound casual, and the lie she told arrived so smoothly that it almost sounded true. She said she hadn't touched it. Her eyes didn't flinch, but her fingers did, the slightest twitch before she tucked them behind her back. That was when the doubt began to take shape, curling quietly in my chest. For the rest of the day, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. I told myself she was a good kid, that she'd never do something like that, not after everything we'd been through. But grief makes liars of us all. It tells you that the ones you love are incapable of betrayal, even as the evidence whispers otherwise. When she left for school, I found myself standing in her room, the air thick with the scent of her perfume, something sweet and cheap that clung to her clothes. I wasn't proud of it, but I started searching. Drawers, the desk, under the bed. I found an envelope instead, torn at the corner, a few bills inside. Money I hadn't given her. That night when she came home, I asked again. My voice was softer this time, not with kindness, but exhaustion. She said she'd borrowed money from a friend, that she was saving for a trip with classmates. Her tone carried that defensive edge teenagers use when they think they've been accused unfairly, but beneath it was guilt. Subtle, trembling, afraid to breathe. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the image of the empty jewelry box haunted every word she said. Later that night, I went to the old cabinet in the hallway, where I kept the photo albums. There was one picture I couldn't stop looking at. Lila was sitting by the lake, her hair blowing across her face, sunlight glinting off the necklace. Emily was there too, much younger, sitting beside her mother, her hands tangled in wildflowers. That picture used to comfort me, but now, all I saw was the necklace, shining between them like a promise or maybe a curse. The next morning, the tension in the house thickened into something tangible. Emily avoided my eyes, her laughter with friends too loud, too forced. I could hear her whispering in her room late into the night. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I passed her door. I told myself to let it go, that it was just teenage distance. But then I saw it, the receipt, folded and tucked into her backpack, still damp from sweat. A pawnshop's name, an address I didn't recognize, and the unmistakable words written in small print. 14-carat gold necklace. Inscription, Forever, Lila. The world fell away. Every sound in the house, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the whisper of the wind through the window, seemed to vanish. There was only that piece of paper in my hand, and the sick realization that my daughter had not only taken her mother's necklace, she had sold it for a vacation, for sand and selfies, and the hollow kind of joy that evaporates when the sun goes down. When she came home that evening, I didn't ask her anything. I just watched her, the way she smiled at me, tired and nervous, as though she could sense the air had changed. I realized then that there are moments when silence hurts more than anger. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but what words could measure that kind of betrayal? So I said nothing. I let the truth sit between us, invisible but sharp enough to draw blood. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, the house steeped in shadow, I couldn't stop hearing Lila's voice. Not her actual voice, but the memory of it. The way she used to laugh softly when Emily ran to her with scraped knees, or the way she'd whisper my name in the dark when sleep wouldn't come. She would have forgiven her, I thought. That was Lila's way. She believed that love wasn't about keeping what was sacred, but about letting go. But I wasn't built like her. I didn't know how to forgive what I couldn't understand. I took the receipt and turned it over, my fingers trembling. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd go to that pawn shop, not to reclaim the necklace. I didn't even know if I wanted it back. I just needed to see it, to see what kind of world could take something so precious and turn it into something transactional. As I turned off the light, I caught a reflection of myself in the window. For a second, I didn't recognize the man looking back. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped under the weight of too many goodbyes. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the night swallowed the sound whole. I thought of Emily, asleep in her room, dreaming of beaches and freedom, unaware that by morning, everything between us would begin to change. The next day would start with a drive, short, quiet, and suffocating. But I didn't know then that it wouldn't just lead me to the pawn shop. It would lead me somewhere much darker, somewhere where the truth didn't set you free. It buried you deeper. The morning of the pawn shop visit felt wrong before it even began. The air was heavy, grey clouds pressing low over the street, and the kind of cold that seeps into the bones without needing wind. Emily was already gone when I woke. Her backpack missing from the hook, a half-finished glass of juice still sweating on the counter. She had left in a hurry, or maybe she just didn't want to see me. Either way, the silence she left behind was unbearable. I poured myself coffee I didn't drink and stared at the receipt again. The ink now smudged where I'd folded it too many times. I told myself it was just about the necklace, just closure. But deep down, I think I already knew this. It was about something else entirely. The kind of wound that starts small but festers until it consumes what's left of love. The pawn shop sat on a corner I'd driven past 100 times without ever noticing. A peeling sign hung crooked over the door, and the windows were cluttered with things that once meant everything to someone. Watches, rings, guitars, cameras. Objects suspended in a strange limbo between ownership and loss. When I stepped inside, the bell above the door gave a soft, tired ring. The air smelled faintly of dust and metal. Behind the counter, an older man looked up from a ledger, his face mapped with lines that told stories I didn't have time to read. I placed the receipt on the counter and said the words like they were someone else's. "I'm here about a necklace." He looked at the paper, then at me, his eyes narrowing slightly as if measuring what kind of man I was. "You here to buy it back?" he asked. The question landed like an accusation. I hesitated, unsure of what I even wanted. "I just want to see it," I said finally. He nodded slowly and disappeared through a curtain behind him. The minutes stretched. Somewhere a clock ticked, steady, indifferent. When he returned, he was holding a small velvet pouch. He placed it on the counter gently, almost reverently. I reached for it but stopped just short, my hand hovering above the soft fabric. I could already feel the weight of it in my chest, heavier than it ever should have been. When I finally opened it, the gold caught the weak light, shimmering faintly like a ghost of the past. The engraving on the back, "Forever, Lila," was still there, though dulled from handling. My throat closed. The room seemed to tilt slightly. It wasn't just a necklace. It was the last thing she ever touched before she left this world. "How much did she sell it for?" I asked. The man hesitated, then named a number so low it felt insulting. I nodded, not angry, just hollow. "Do you remember her?" I asked quietly. The girl who brought it in? He rubbed his chin, thinking. Yeah, pretty kid. Nervous. Kept looking over her shoulder like she was being followed. Said it was her mother's, that she didn't need it anymore. People say things like that to make it hurt less. His eyes softened. You her dad? I nodded once. He sighed, as if he'd seen too many of these stories play out. You can buy it back if you want. It's still yours in a way, but I couldn't bring myself to. I handed it back, thanked him, and left. Outside, the wind had picked up, stirring fallen leaves into brief spirals. The world seemed to move normally, but nothing inside me did. I stood by my car for a long time, staring at the receipt in my hand. The number, the date, the signature, all proof that what had once been sacred was now just another transaction. When I got home, Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to notice me. The television was on, muted. A travel vlog played. Beaches, laughter, sunlight on water. She looked up, her expression caught between guilt and defiance. Dad, she said, her tone too casual. You okay? I sat down across from her, the quiet between us stretching thin. I went to the pawn shop, I said simply. The colour drained from her face. Her phone slipped from her hand and landed face down on the carpet. She didn't deny it this time. Instead, tears welled in her eyes, trembling on her lashes before she wiped them away angrily. I just wanted to get away, she whispered. I needed something that wasn't this house. Wasn't you looking at me like I'm broken? Her words hit harder than I expected. You think you're the only one who lost her, I said, my voice low but shaking. You think selling that necklace would make you forget? She shook her head, sobbing now, her words unraveling. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about breathing. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to shout, to make her understand what she had done. But watching her cry, shoulders shaking like a child again, I saw something else. The same loneliness I carried, mirrored in her. The same desperate attempt to make sense of absence. She had sold the necklace not out of greed, but out of grief. And yet, the damage was the same. Some things, once taken, can never truly be given back. When she ran to her room and slammed the door, the house returned to its suffocating quiet. I sat alone in the dim living room, the sound of her muffled crying leaking through the walls. On the coffee table, her phone buzzed. A message preview glowed faintly across the cracked screen. Don't forget the tickets. We leave Friday. I picked it up, the message staring back at me like a wound. So it was still happening. The vacation. The escape. She had traded her mother's memory for a trip she might not even enjoy. For a fleeting taste of freedom she'd probably regret the moment she landed. I placed the phone back down, the screen going dark, and for the first time in years, I felt something dangerously close to hatred. Not for her, but for the silence that had made us strangers under the same roof. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lila, her hand on the necklace, her smile gentle and forgiving. I imagined her asking me not to be too hard on Emily, to remember that love isn't about keeping what's sacred locked away. But I couldn't hear her voice clearly anymore. It had faded, like an old song you can't quite remember the melody of. By morning, Emily was gone again. No note, no goodbye, just absence. On the counter, beside her empty glass, she'd left the receipt I'd dropped, folded neatly, as if returning evidence. And that was when the phone rang again, the same strange number as before. My stomach turned cold as I answered. This time, the voice wasn't a stranger's. It was someone who claimed to know my wife. Someone who said there were things about that necklace I didn't understand. The static in her voice carried a secret. I wasn't ready but before I could ask, the line went dead. The voice lingered long after the call ended, a ghost caught in the wires. I stood there for a while, staring at the phone like it might speak again if I waited long enough, but it didn't. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, steady and oblivious. I replayed her words in my head. I knew your wife. She'd said it like a confession, like she wasn't sure she should. There had been urgency in her tone too, a tremor that didn't belong to a stranger making idle conversation. Then the static had swallowed her voice whole. By the time I got to the pawn shop again, the morning had bled into early afternoon. The air was thick with the smell of rain, and puddles collected in the cracked asphalt outside. The same old bell chimed when I pushed open the door. The shopkeeper looked up from his counter, surprise flickering across his face. Back already? He asked. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure why I was there. Did a woman call here? I asked. My voice too sharp, too loud for the quiet of the room. He frowned. "We don't get many calls," he said slowly. "Why? Something wrong?" I didn't answer. Instead, I asked to see the necklace again. He gave a reluctant sigh, then disappeared behind the curtain like before. When he returned, he placed the velvet pouch in front of me. But this time, I didn't open it right away. I just looked at it. Really looked. That small, ordinary thing had somehow drawn a line through everything I thought I understood about my life. "Do you ever think about the people behind all this?" I asked him. "Who owned them, what they meant?" He gave a half smile, weary and practiced. "Every day. But you can't think too much about that in this business. If you do, you start seeing ghosts in everything." He paused, studying me. "You seeing ghosts, mister?" I almost laughed. "Something like that," I said. When I finally opened the pouch, the necklace seemed dimmer than before, as if it too was tired of being handled. I turned it over in my hand, tracing the engraving with my thumb. Then I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint seam along the edge of the clasp. So fine it could have been missed by anyone not looking closely. I pressed my nail against it, and it gave slightly under pressure. A small click. The clasp opened wider than it should have, and a folded slip of paper slid out, yellowed and brittle. I froze. The shopkeeper leaned closer. "That part of it?" he asked, curious. I didn't answer. My heart was beating too hard to speak. I unfolded the paper carefully. The handwriting was small, neat, unmistakably Lila's. Only a few words were written. "If something happens to me, tell him the truth." That was it. No signature, no date, just those words. I stood there, staring at the paper, my vision blurring as the meaning began to sink in. The truth. What truth? My wife had been sick, cancer, slow and merciless. There were no secrets left to tell, or at least that's what I had always believed. I looked at the shopkeeper, but he was watching me with quiet respect, like he knew whatever I'd found wasn't his business. I slipped the note into my pocket and handed the necklace back. My hands were shaking. "You sure you don't want to keep it?" he asked softly. "Some things, they find their way home for a reason." But I didn't take it. I couldn't. Not yet. I thanked him, stepped outside, and stood under the overhang as the rain began to fall. The water pooled around my shoes, carrying small bits of dirt and paper away into the gutter. I thought about calling Emily, about telling her what I'd found. But what would I even say? That her mother had left behind a message hidden inside the very thing she sold? That the necklace she'd pawned for a vacation might hold the key to something we'd both missed? Instead, I drove. Nowhere in particular. The rain turned the world into a blur of grey and motion. I ended up at the old hospital, the one where Lila had spent her last weeks. It wasn't intentional. My hands just turned the wheel that way. The building still stood, though it looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the life it once held. I parked across the street and sat there, engine idling, the note clutched in my hand. It was strange how grief worked. It didn't fade, it just changed shape, slipping quietly into new forms. A word, a smell, a place. And now, this note, this simple, terrible thing that had woken up everything I thought I'd buried. I read the words again, and this time they sounded different. Not desperate, not frightened, determined, as if she had known something I didn't. When I got home, the answering machine light was blinking. One new message. My stomach tightened. I pressed play. It was the same woman's voice, the one from the night before. Her tone was urgent, trembling. "I shouldn't be calling you," she said. "But Lila wanted you to know. She told me not to tell anyone unless the necklace resurfaced. She said it would mean someone close to you had broken a promise." The message ended abruptly. The room felt colder suddenly, the air too still. Someone close. There was only Emily and me now, and Lila's words on the note echoed inside my head, relentless and hollow. "Tell him the truth." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the rain against the windows, my mind running through memories like film reels played in reverse. The hospital room, her hand in mine. The way she tried to say something near the end. Her lips moving but no sound coming out. I thought she was just weak. I thought there was nothing left to say. But what if I had been wrong? What if the truth she'd wanted to tell me had been waiting all this time, hidden in a necklace, buried under our daughter's guilt? When I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I dreamt of Lila standing in the hospital garden, her hair tangled in the wind, her hand reaching for me. The necklace glinted at her throat, and when I reached out to touch it, she whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Just 3 words, swallowed by the wind. When I woke, The sun was bleeding into the sky. And on the kitchen table, where I'd left nothing the night before, sat the necklace. Cleaned, polished, restored to its former shine. Emily was standing beside it, her eyes red from crying. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "we need to talk." Emily stood there in the doorway like a shadow that wasn't sure if it wanted to belong to the light. Her hands were clasped in front of her, trembling just enough for me to notice. The necklace lay between us on the kitchen table, bright, polished, unforgiving. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence had weight, the kind that fills a room until it begins to hum. I didn't ask how she got it back. I could already guess. The pawnshop receipt had vanished from the counter, and the way her eyes wouldn't meet mine told me everything I needed to know. She had gone back for it. Maybe she thought returning it would erase what she'd done. Maybe she was trying to rewrite the story before I could finish reading it. "I found something," I said finally. My voice sounded foreign, distant. I reached into my pocket and slid the folded note across the table. She didn't touch it. Her gaze flickered down, then up again, wary. It was hidden inside the clasp. I waited for her to ask, but she didn't. So I unfolded it myself and read the words aloud, each syllable a stone in my throat. "If something happens to me, tell him the truth." Her face went pale. The color drained slowly, as if someone had pulled a plug. "What truth?" she whispered. I searched her eyes for recognition, for something that told me she understood more than she was letting on. But she looked genuinely lost, terrified even. "I don't know," I said. "But someone called me. She said your mother asked her to tell me if the necklace ever resurfaced." Emily shook her head, stepping back slightly, as though the table between us were a line she couldn't cross. "That doesn't make sense." "Mom, she never said anything like that. She was just sick." Her voice cracked on the last word. "She didn't have secrets." I wanted to believe that, but the paper in my hand said otherwise. The handwriting was unmistakably Lila's, small, careful, written by someone who knew she wouldn't have many more chances to leave her mark. "Emily," I said softly, "is there something you're not telling me? Something about the necklace?" She flinched, not at the words, but at the sound of her name spoken that way. "No," she said too quickly. Then quieter. "I just wanted to get away, Dad, that's all. I swear I didn't know there was anything inside it." Her hands trembled, her voice collapsing under the weight of honesty. I thought, if I left, maybe it would stop hurting for a while. Everywhere I look in this house, it's like she's still here. I can't breathe. Something inside me softened then. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. Because I'd felt that same suffocating ache too, the kind that turns memories into ghosts. "You can't run from grief," I said quietly. "It follows you, even when you change your name." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. But I could tell there was more she wanted to say. Something caught between her heart and her mouth. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "do you remember the night Mom died?" The question landed like a shard of glass. "Every second of it," I said. She swallowed hard. "Do you remember when she asked to talk to me alone?" I nodded. It had been late, the hospital corridors dim, the machines whispering their mechanical lullaby. Lila had asked me to step outside so she could speak to Emily privately. I had waited just beyond the door, staring at the pale light under the frame, hearing the faint murmur of voices I couldn't make out. When I came back in, Emily had been crying, and Lila had looked exhausted but calm, her hands still resting on our daughters. I'd never asked what they talked about. Some things, I thought then, belonged only to mothers and daughters. "She told me something," Emily whispered now. "Something I didn't understand. I thought it was just the medication. But now," she trailed off, her eyes flicking to the necklace, then back to me. "What did she say?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, tears welled again, and she shook her head helplessly. I don't remember it clearly. It was like she was trying to tell me something important, but her voice kept fading. She said, "If he asks, tell him I did it for love." That's all. I thought she was talking about you. I sat down, hard, as if my legs had given out. The note, the phone call, the words. They began to form a pattern I didn't yet recognize but could feel pressing in on all sides. "Emily," I said slowly, "if that's true, then whatever she didn't want me to find out." She nodded miserably. "I know, and I think that's why she gave me the necklace. The day before she died, she told me to keep it safe. But I couldn't. I didn't want it. It felt heavy." The necklace glimmered faintly in the dim light, innocent and terrible all at once. For the first time, I noticed a small indentation near the engraving, as if someone had pressed too hard with a fingernail, desperate to hold on to something that was slipping away. I reached out, but Emily stopped me, her hand gripping mine. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't dig any deeper. Maybe it's better not to know." But it was already too late. The door had opened, and whatever lay behind it wasn't going to close itself. I told her as much. She nodded weakly, then disappeared into her room, leaving the necklace where it lay. Hours passed. I couldn't focus on anything. The note sat beside me, whispering its secret every time my eyes drifted to it. Tell him the truth. The words felt alive now, restless. And when I picked up my phone to distract myself, I noticed a message notification I hadn't seen before. It was from an unknown number. You shouldn't have opened it. No name, no context. Just those 5 words glowing on the screen like an omen. My heart began to pound. I typed a reply, "Who is this?" But before I could hit send, a second message appeared. "Ask your daughter about the photos she never sent." I froze. Photos? I looked toward the hallway where Emily's door was closed, a faint line of light visible underneath. Something in me resisted the urge to knock. Instead, I walked quietly back to the table and stared at the necklace one more time. It caught the light from the window, casting a thin, golden reflection across the floor that reached almost to her door. The house was still. Too still, the kind of quiet that hides something just beneath it. Somewhere in that silence, a phone vibrated. Not mine, hers, and then another soft sound. A notification chime. I didn't move, not at first, but the words from the message on my screen wouldn't stop echoing. The photos she never sent. Whatever this was, whatever truth Lila had buried in that necklace, it wasn't finished with us yet. The night pressed in like a confession. The walls of the house felt closer than usual, the air too still, as if it were listening. I stood in the hallway for what felt like a lifetime, staring at Emily's door. My pulse thrummed in my throat. That ancient rhythm of dread that only fathers know when something's gone wrong with their child. I wanted to knock, to ask, to demand. But the words from that text still pulsed in my mind like a wound that wouldn't clot. Ask your daughter about the photos she never sent. At last, I knocked softly. "Emily?" Silence. Then, faintly, the sound of muffled sobs. I pushed the door open. The glow of her phone screen cast pale light across her face, streaked with tears. She looked up at me, startled, like someone caught trespassing in their own guilt. I didn't say anything. I just held up my phone, showing her the message. Her lips parted, a whisper slipping out that barely reached me. "You weren't supposed to see that." I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "Who sent it, Emily?" She didn't answer. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down on the bed, the screen still glowing faintly. I caught a glimpse, a thread of conversation, unread messages, a name I didn't recognize. "Emily," I said again, trying to keep my voice steady. "What photos?" Her face crumpled. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, the words tumbling out between breaths. I just wanted to feel close to her again. After she died, I found Mom's old phone in her dresser. There were pictures on it. Photos she'd taken right before she got sick. But they weren't normal pictures. Some were of people I didn't know. "Some were of you. Of me?" She nodded. From outside, through the window, the world tilted. "What are you talking about?" I thought maybe she was taking them for a project or something, but then there were others. Ones with notes, dates, names. I didn't understand. And then one night someone messaged me. Said they knew about the necklace. They told me to send the photos or they'd tell you. Her voice broke again. I panicked. I deleted everything, but I think they still have copies. I felt cold all over. "Who?" She shook her head, crying harder now. "I don't know!" They never said. It started right after I pawned the necklace. That's why I went back for it. They told me if I brought it home, they'd leave us alone. The room seemed to shrink around us. Somewhere beneath all of this, the lies, the fear, the silence, was the truth Lila had tried to bury. And now, even from the grave, she was pulling us toward it. I picked up Emily's phone. The chat thread was still open. The contact name was a single letter. S. The last message, time-stamped just minutes earlier, read, "Check your father's voicemail." He's already heard it. A chill crawled up my spine. I took my phone from my pocket, opened the voicemail app. There it was, a new message, marked as received less than 10 minutes ago. I pressed play. At first, just static. Then a faint, familiar voice beneath it. Lila's, weak, trembling but unmistakable. David, if you're hearing this, it means she found the necklace. I didn't want to keep it from you, but I had to protect her. They were watching even then. Don't trust the numbers that call you. Don't, the message cut off. A click, then silence. I looked up at Emily. Her face was drained of all color. That's impossible, she whispered. Mom's phone was wiped. How did they… Before she could finish, my phone buzzed again. A new text from S. She told you not to trust the calls. But you answered, didn't you? I froze. I hadn't told anyone about the call. Not even Emily. The sound of my phone vibrating filled the room again. Another call. Same unknown number. The screen flashed insistently, casting an eerie light over the walls. I hesitated only a moment before answering. Who is this? A pause. Then a low, distorted voice. Neither male nor female, mechanical but intimate. You shouldn't have opened the clasp, it said. My hand went cold. What do you want? A soft laugh, not cruel but knowing. What your wife died protecting. The line went dead. For a long time, neither of us moved. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on Emily's dresser, each second scraping across the air like a blade. Finally, Emily whispered, Dad, what if Mom didn't die the way we thought she did? I stared at the necklace, still lying on her nightstand. The reflection of the phone screen shimmered across its surface like a heartbeat. Somewhere beneath that thin layer of gold and memory, something was buried. Something that had survived her, outlived her, and was still reaching for us now. And I knew, as I picked it up, that whatever came next would destroy what little peace we still had. The necklace was heavier than I remembered. It sat in my palm like a relic, the chain coiling around my fingers cold and alive, as if it remembered more than I did. Under the dim light of Emily's lamp, I could see where the clasp had been pried open, a tiny, near-invisible seam that wasn't part of Lila's original design. I remembered giving it to her, years ago, on our 10th anniversary. I remembered the way she laughed when she read the inscription, Forever, Lila, and how she said it was silly to etch her own name on something meant to last longer than either of us. But now, that laughter seemed like a ghost, hollow, distant, almost mocking. Emily sat beside me, clutching her knees, her breath shallow. What did they mean? She whispered. About the clasp. I didn't answer right away. My fingers worked at the tiny hinge, the one that shouldn't have been there. I pressed my nail against it until it clicked softly. And then, for the first time in years, it opened. Inside the delicate cavity, hidden where no one would have thought to look, was something impossibly small. A folded piece of photo paper, yellowed with time. I eased it out carefully, afraid it might disintegrate in my hands. It wasn't a picture of us. It wasn't even a picture at all. It was a fragment of a letter, written in Lila's unmistakable handwriting. Sharp, elegant, deliberate. The ink had bled slightly, as if from tears or rain. If they ever find me, tell Emily not to look for the house. Tell David to burn everything in the attic. There's more buried there than I could carry. My chest tightened. The house, the attic. I thought of all the boxes stacked there. Old photo albums. Furniture from before Emily was born. The trunk of Lila's teaching journals. I had never gone through them after she died. I couldn't. It felt like trespassing in her memory. Emily's voice broke through my thoughts. Dad, what house? What did she mean? I shook my head. I don't know, but we'll find out. The rest of the night passed in fragments. The two of us sitting on the floor. The letter trembling between us, neither willing to say what we were both thinking. That maybe, just maybe, Lila hadn't been who we thought she was. When dawn came, we went to the attic. The air was thick with dust, and every creak of the wood sounded like a whisper. I pulled down the cord, and the ladder groaned as it unfolded. Emily hesitated, her hand gripping mine. What if she didn't want us to see? She asked. She left this for us, I said. Whatever it is, she wanted us to find it now. We climbed. The smell of cedar and old paper filled the space. Sunlight filtered through the tiny window, slicing the darkness into ribbons. I found the trunk, the one Lila used to keep locked, the one she'd forbidden either of us to touch. The key was still taped beneath the lid, where she'd always hidden it. I slid it into the lock, and it turned with a sound that felt far too loud. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them, each bound in worn leather, each dated with years that stretched back before Emily was born. I picked one up and flipped through it. The handwriting was hers, but the tone was different, clinical, detached, like notes from someone studying their own life. February 3rd. The man called again, said he'd seen me near the river. Said he knows where I buried it. I told him he's wrong, but he laughed. Said I can't hide from myself. I turned the page. March 12th. David thinks I'm working late. I saw him at the university with the others, the research team. If they knew what I did, they'd never forgive me. Emily looked over my shoulder. What did she do? I didn't know. I kept reading. The entries grew stranger, less coherent. Mentions of the house by the lake, the gold sample, the experiment that wasn't supposed to work. Words like signal, frequency, echo. And then, the last page. If anything happens to me, the necklace will find its way back. It always does. The attic felt suddenly colder. The morning light dimmed as clouds swallowed the sun. Emily's eyes were wide, her voice trembling. Dad, do you think Mom... Before she could finish, my phone buzzed again. A new message from S. You shouldn't have opened the trunk. Emily gasped. They're watching us. I looked around, my mind racing. The only window in the attic overlooked the street, where the early fog hung thick and grey. And there, parked across the road, was a dark car, engine idling, its windshield reflecting nothing. No driver, no movement, just presence. Another message appeared. You're close. Burn it, or she'll never rest. For the first time I felt something beyond fear, a kind of grim understanding. Whoever this was, they weren't after money. They were after silence. They wanted the truth buried again. Emily clutched my arm. Dad, we should call the police. I shook my head. And tell them what? That my dead wife left hidden notes in her jewelry and someone's sending messages from beyond her grave? Her lips trembled. Then what do we do? I stared at the trunk, at the pages filled with Lila's words. Her secrets, her warnings, her guilt. The smell of old paper filled my lungs, thick and suffocating. We finish it, I said. Whatever she started, we finish it. Outside, the car's engine finally stopped. The silence that followed was so deep it felt alive. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, I thought I heard something faint. A sound like a voice caught in static, whispering my name. And when I looked down at the necklace again, its reflection seemed to shimmer not with gold, but with something darker. Something that had been waiting all these years for me to finally listen. The lake had always been a place of peace once, a mirror of the sky, surrounded by whispering pines and cattails that swayed like old secrets. But as I stood there again, 2 decades later, it didn't look like the same place. The water was lower than I remembered, the air heavier, and the silence no longer comforting. Emily stood beside me, her hair whipping in the cold wind, her eyes scanning the far shore where the trees grew thick and black. The GPS had led us here, to coordinates embedded in the metadata of one of Lila's old journal entries. Coordinates she must have wanted me to find, or maybe she wanted me to stay away. The dirt road we had followed ended at a rusted gate chained shut. Beyond it, a narrow path cut through the woods, disappearing into shadow. There was a sign nailed crookedly to a tree. The paint almost gone, but still legible enough to read the single word, private. Emily hesitated. Do you think this is the house she meant? I nodded slowly. It has to be. We climbed over the gate. The path wound upward, stones crunching underfoot, until the trees parted just enough to reveal it. A cabin, small and sagging under the weight of years. Its windows dark, its roof bowed like an old man's spine. Every instinct told me to turn back, but then I saw it. The mark carved into the front door. A small, precise engraving of a necklace, its chain looping into an infinity symbol. Lila's symbol. Inside, the air was stale and damp, carrying the scent of mildew and rust. Dust motes drifted in the narrow shafts of light filtering through cracks in the boarded windows. Emily stayed close, her hand gripping my jacket. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the groan of the wind, felt amplified, intrusive. We found the first clue in the fireplace, a metal box, sealed tight and half buried in ash. I pried it open with a rusted poker. Inside were old photographs, some of Lila alone in this very cabin, others of strangers, faces half lit and unsmiling. There was one of her holding a small golden locket, not the necklace, but similar, and written on the back, in her handwriting, Prototype 1. Frequency stable, Emily frowned. Prototype. I sifted through the rest of the photos. Each one showed the same object, a piece of jewelry that glowed faintly in candlelight. Some were necklaces, others rings or bracelets. All had one thing in common, a delicate circuitry etched beneath the gold, like veins of light. A chill went through me. She was working on something, I murmured. Something more than just art. Something scientific, Emily added, her voice hushed. Dad, do you think this is what she meant by the experiment in her journals? Before I could answer, there was a thud upstairs. We froze. Probably an animal, I said, though I didn't believe it. I climbed the staircase slowly, each step complaining beneath my weight. At the top, a narrow hallway led to 2 rooms. The door on the left was half open. I pushed it gently, and the smell of chemicals hit me, metallic and acrid. Inside was what remained of a small lab, beakers clouded with residue, notebooks warped from moisture, wires dangling from a half-disassembled machine. Emily gasped softly. She built all this here? I stepped closer to the table, brushing away the dust. There were diagrams, anatomical sketches, waveforms, notes written in hurried, uneven lines, signal transmission through organic resonance, memory imprint stabilization, emotional frequency lock. I didn't understand most of it, but one sentence stood out, underlined twice. Test subject. My throat went dry. I whispered. Emily! She backed away, shaking her head. No, that can't be right. I wasn't even born when she was doing this. But another note, dated a year before Emily's birth, said otherwise. Transfer complete. Resonance achieved. Subject stable for now. Emily pressed a hand to her chest. Dad, what if whatever she was working on, what if it's inside me? The thought struck me like lightning. Absurd, terrifying, and yet impossible to dismiss. The necklace, the experiments, the warnings, it all circled back to her. Before I could say anything, the sound came again. Not from the hallway this time, but from the corner of the room, a faint buzzing like static from an old radio. I turned. The necklace, still in my pocket, had begun to vibrate. The chain pulsed with a dim, rhythmic light. Soft at first, then growing stronger, synchronized with Emily's breathing. Dad, she whispered. It's responding to me. I pulled it out, holding it between us. The glow intensified, and for a moment, I thought I heard something beneath the hum. A voice, fragmented, overlapping itself. A whisper that wasn't sound but memory. Then the phone in my pocket buzzed again. Another message from S. You found the house. Don't make the same mistake she did. I looked toward the window. The car from before was parked at the edge of the woods, barely visible through the trees. Someone was out there watching, waiting. Emily turned to me, her voice shaking. What mistake? I didn't have an answer, but deep down I knew. Whatever Lila had done here, whatever she'd put into that necklace, it hadn't been meant to save us. It had been meant to contain something, something that had finally found its way back home. And as the necklace's glow reflected in Emily's terrified eyes, I realized we weren't the only ones inside the house anymore. The light filled the room like a pulse, steady and alive, flickering in the dust like the heartbeat of the house itself. Emily stumbled back, her eyes wide, the gold chain swaying between us like a pendulum, measuring time we no longer had. The hum grew louder, resonating through the floorboards, through the air, through my ribs. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was vibration. Something deeper, almost sentient. Dad! Emily gasped. It's inside my head. I reached for her. But she flinched, pressing her palms to her temples. The glow intensified, washing her in soft golden light that seemed to ripple beneath her skin. It wasn't reflection. It was emission, like the light was responding to her pulse. Then, layered beneath the sound, I heard it. Lila's voice. Faint, but unmistakable, as though carried on a frequency only the necklace could translate. David, it whispered, drawn out like breath. You found it, I froze. Lila? Emily's eyes rolled back for a moment, her lips parting as though she were about to speak. But the voice that came wasn't hers. It was the same tone, the same gentle inflection I hadn't heard in years. You shouldn't have come here. The words hit me like a physical blow. My heart pounded, my hands shaking as I stared at her, at Emily, standing in that decaying room. Her mother's light spilling from within her like a reflection of something that had never truly died. What is this? I demanded. What did you do? She blinked, and for a heartbeat I saw Lila looking back at me, her expression calm, almost sorrowful. I didn't have time to explain. The experiment wasn't supposed to continue, but after the accident, I couldn't let go. I tied what was left of me to the gold, to her. It was the only way. Emily's voice trembled between words, layered, overlapping, half her own, half something else. The gold was pure, conductive. It held the signal. I shook my head, stepping back. You mean you put yourself into her? The voice softened. Not me, not completely, just echoes, the parts that wouldn't stop loving you. The hum deepened, shaking the windows. Downstairs, something shattered. I glanced toward the hallway, and for a moment I could swear the shadows there were moving. Slow, deliberate, aware. Lila, I whispered, if this is really you, you have to stop. You're hurting her. But the voice, or whatever it was, sounded almost mournful. I tried to stop them, David, the others. They wanted to use it. To use her, I had to hide everything before they could finish the replication. That's why I left the message. Why I told you to burn it. Emily suddenly gasped, clutching her chest. The light flared bright enough to burn spots into my vision. Dad! It's too loud! I grabbed the necklace and tore it from her neck. The light cut out instantly, plunging the room into darkness. Emily collapsed into my arms, trembling. I held her, my heart hammering so hard it felt like the sound might split the air. When I looked up again, something had changed. The shadows in the corner had shape now. Faint, flickering, like silhouettes caught in static. I heard footsteps creak on the stairs below, slow and deliberate. Someone was coming up. I pocketed the necklace and pulled Emily toward the door. We're leaving, now. We rushed down the stairs. The air grew colder with every step, our breath misting in front of us. When we reached the bottom, the front door was ajar, the hinges groaning softly. Outside, the car's headlights were on, beams slicing through the fog. But no one was inside. Emily looked back toward the staircase. Dad! I followed her gaze. At the top of the stairs stood a figure. Not solid, not quite there. Just light and dust shaped like memory. Lila. Her eyes shimmered faintly, not angry, not pleading, just watching. For a moment, the hum returned. Softer this time, like a goodbye whispered through static. Then she was gone. We ran. The air outside was freezing, the fog curling around us like breath. The car door swung open easily, the keys still in the ignition. I didn't question it. I started the engine, gravel spitting from the tires as we sped down the narrow path. Branches clawing at the windows. Emily was silent beside me, staring out the window, her hand clutching the spot where the necklace had been. After a long while, she spoke. Dad. When she spoke through me, I saw something. Not memories, equations, patterns, like sound waves, looping forever. It wasn't just her voice. It was everything she'd ever felt. Trapped inside. I tightened my grip on the wheel. We're not going back there, she nodded faintly. She didn't want us to. When we finally reached the main road, I pulled over. My hands were still trembling. The necklace lay on the dashboard, dull now, lifeless. For a long time, we just sat there, the night pressing in around us, both too afraid to speak. Then, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from S, it's done. She's free. Keep it buried. No number, no trace. Just those words. I rolled down the window and held the necklace out. The metal caught the faint moonlight. The last remnant of something that had been love, science, obsession, and grief all at once. I let it fall. It hit the gravel with a muted chime, then vanished into the dark. As we drove away, I felt the air grow lighter. For the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't heavy. Emily reached over and took my hand, her grip small but steady. She whispered, "Do you think she's really gone?" I looked at her, at the reflection of the road lights moving across her face, and thought of that voice in the attic, the way it had said the parts that wouldn't stop loving you. "I think," I said softly, "she's where she always wanted to be." And for the first time since the day she died, I didn't feel haunted. I felt heard. The night closed behind us, quiet, complete. And somewhere beneath the lake's still surface, the echoes finally faded.